What's up, everyone, and welcome to ClearTalk. So in this video, the second video for today, we are continuing with Gaza. We talked about the report that was blocked from early on in the incursion of Israel on Gaza and the genocide that that evolved in that time, the early reporting from just mere months after the start, after October 7th, and how that was blocked, preventing potentially, from the administration, the Biden administration, to, second guess continuing aid. And now we're going to look at basically kind of go through an update of Gaza at the moment. We have a video here I'm going to go over, or we're going to watch and react to, from Al Jazeera about the daily life of Gaza right now, the daily nightmare, versus what U.S., the Trump administration is, the propaganda that they have put forth on the future of Gaza, and how reality with that sort of fantasy utopia that they are advertising and trying to convince us of, whether that is really possible and could come to, into what is the reality of that so-called plan. So we're going to look at this. I think it's a very good report, and it's about 25 minutes of video. Not sure if we'll really watch all of it, but we'll go through as much of it we can, because I think it's one of the guys from Drop Site News is giving the information, and it's just he does a great job of explaining and breaking down the realities and information that he has been able to access about this plan. So it's very good. So thank you very much for joining me here on Clear Talk. If you want to check out more videos from the channel, please do so. Consider subscribing, like, share, comment, all the good stuff to get more videos in front of more people. If you like to check out videos from my other channels, JMDPLAY, Puzzling, if you like what you see there, consider subscribing to those as well. Just help grow those channels and support those channels. Patreon there, $3 a month. You can support any of the channels you would like to help grow those channels, help grow Patreon, help grow JMD Nation, and contribute however you would like to. Any contribution and support you give is very much appreciated, and I thank you very, very much. And if you return, you are freaking amazing. You are amazing. Thank you for coming. Keep coming back, because you are what makes JMD Nation. All right, so we're going to swap over here, and let's start. Let's start this report, or this interview here.
Hi, I'm Steve Clements, and I have a question. President Trump says he has a plan to rule Gaza, but how much is real and how much is fantasy? Let's get to the bottom line. On paper, and to hear U.S. officials talk about the future of Gaza, there's nothing but, quote, peace, stability, and opportunity for the 2 million shell-shocked Palestinians living there. But if you look at the situation on the ground, nothing looks that promising. Israel still controls over more than half of the Strip, still blocks most basic supplies from entering, and still kills about 5 people per day on average. And that's after the ceasefire brokered by Trump last October. Israel's devastating war destroyed most of the buildings, so most people are still living in tent camps, far from having any semblance of normal life. Now the U.S. has created an elaborate structure of not one, but 3 governing bodies for Gaza. A board of peace, which doesn't mention Gaza at all and is chaired by President Trump. An executive board with a high representative for Gaza and a Palestinian National Committee for the administration of Gaza. So what does the U.S. want to achieve, and what's actually doable? Today we're talking with Sharif Abdel Qaddous, the Middle East editor for Drop Site News. Sharif, thank you so much for joining us.
Look, and that is the big question. Like, this plan and everything that's being put in place, the board of peace, which full on has Trump at the helm, and full like emperor like king control of who's on it and what's being talked about, what's the issues, or like and their charter, the charter for this board, not in any way mentions or talks about Gaza and or anything like that. It's just a broad ass board. Look that we've reported on before. It looks like is Trump's attempt at creating a new UN under his power and control. It is crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And then these other operating bodies of technocrats and officials to help run and manage Gaza. It's just it is. And many of which have nothing or questionable in what their intentions for Gaza actually are. I mean, it is quite wild that what was been talked about and how that would even be established looking at the conditions right now on the ground. And the fact that Israel didn't actually really agree to this board. And yet, and the realities of what Israel is doing right now and how they are occupying over half of the, and things that he will talk about. It is, I don't just, the reality does not match at all. So let's continue.
I've got a clip from President Trump talking about the new Board of Peace and Gaza. Let's listen.
We're going to be very successful in Gaza. It's going to be a great thing to watch, and we can do other things. We can do numerous other things. Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do, and we'll do it in conjunction with the United Nations, And
I'm just interested from you, is this going to be a great thing for Gaza?
I don't think by any metric it's going to be a great thing for Gaza. What we saw almost looked like a theme park of dispossession for Palestinians in the renderings they showed and so forth. This Board of Peace, first of all, the actual charter of the Board of Peace, there's no mention of Palestine. There's no mention of Gaza. There's no mention of the Palestinian people. There's no mention of the right to self-determination. There's no mention of the right of return.
Not whatsoever.
What we do know is that Trump is the chairman of the Board of Peace with emperor-like powers. He can only be replaced if he resigns or if he's found to be incapacitated, but you need a unanimous vote, which is something that is practically unattainable. He has the exclusive authority to designate his successor, to invite new member states, and to veto any decisions. And no Palestinians.
And more than likely, he would just appoint like Don Jr. or some shit like that to take over the board. Like it, or maybe even hope that Barron by then would be able to take it over. I mean, who knows? This whole setup of this board is insane. It's just absolutely insane.
Are included in the Board of Peace. Although Trump did give a spot to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who remains under war crimes indictment and is subject to an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. So you have, this Board of Peace, you have the so-called founding executive board beneath that. Then there's another layer of bureaucracy with something called the Gaza Executive Board, with several of the same members serving in an advisory capacity. We can talk about that later. But then way down at the bottom of the totem pole is something called the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. And this is made up of Palestinian technocrats that are supposed to implement some of these policies on the ground. So this is almost a farcical manifestation of colonialism in the 21st century. It's almost like a parody of a colonial body. If you had presented this a few years ago, you would have been laughed out of the room, except that it's actually real. And then if we look at the nuts and bolts of it, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, delivered a presentation at Davos about what he called, the master plan for the redevelopment and so-called reconstruction of Gaza, what he called the new Gaza. And just as a side note, one of the presentation slides included Arabic script that was incorrectly written in reverse. So from left to right, Arabic script is written from right to left, and the letters were disconnected. So it's hard to take these people seriously because, they're really quite buffoonish in some ways. But these are the people in.
And I immediately knew that it was complete bullshit from the moment he projected this type of images going on. Like this utopia, like futuristic fucking city setup or whatever. Like there's no fucking way that anything like this is actually going to be implemented. It is just like this fantasy that they are throwing out just to make people go, ooh, ah, and like mesmerize them into accepting what they are about to try to implement there. That's what I took from it.
Power. Yeah. These are the people in charge of the greatest, the most powerful military and the biggest. It included economic zones, industrial parks, and residential zones. And now we actually have a glimpse of what is being planned for these residential zones, and it's truly Orwellian. I think first we have to get a lay of the land of what Gaza looks like now after 2 years of Israel's genocidal assault. So effectively at the moment, Gaza has been cleaved in half. After October 10th and the so-called ceasefire, Israeli troops withdrew to what's called the Yellow Line, and they occupy over 50% of the Gaza Strip. Now, analysis of satellite imagery by groups like Forensic Architecture, which we have published at Dropsite News, show how Israel is physically altering the geography of the land in that area that it controls. So one thing that they're doing is a lot of construction of military infrastructure and roads. So they appear to be laying the groundwork to establish a permanent presence in more than half of Gaza. They've constructed at least 13 new military outposts since the ceasefire alone. So I think now there's something like 50 military outposts in that area. And they've also expanded a network of roads connecting these military outposts inside Gaza to the Israeli road network and to bases and settlements outside of Gaza in Israel.
I mean, this is crazy. This is, like I said, he's basically stating out this permanent setup that Israel has been working on and constructing, based in this map you see here. It says, Israeli military controlled zone, which is this entire zone. This is the zone that they've got like bordered off for the people of Gaza to stay and reside in, while they, have set this barrier, which is what happened in the first phase. And as he goes on to talk, to say, even this line has shrunk. Like they continue to kind of push the border further and further, little by little, as they are constructing all these military outposts, new military outposts in September. The darker ones or the newer ones, like they've got military outposts all around the border, whatever. And he'll go on to say that they are, where before it was kind of this imaginary border that, it was undistinguishable really, or hard for Palestinians even to distinguish where the border was. And that was one reason why a lot of Palestinians were getting shot, or, that's the argument, is that they were passing over that border, coming close to that border, and Israeli IDF soldiers were shooting them and killing because they were considering them threats because they were trying to come close or over the border. Even though there was no way really for them to even identify what was the border. It's not like they're walking around with fucking maps and or whatever. So now Israel's even conducting a literal physical border, mounds of dirt and stuff as a physical border. Which, I mean, it's just a continuation of a more permanent like condition, where it's at this point, this is, we're supposed to be in phase 2. They're supposed to be backing up even further from this point, but instead they're pushing forward. So it's the exact opposite of what this original ceasefire deal was to begin with, which shows again that Israel just does whatever they want.
Israeli maps, or it was delineated by the military's placement of these physical from satellite imagery, that since December, Israel has been turning the yellow line into an actual physical border. So, previously the yellow line was only drawn in Israeli maps, or it was delineated by the military's placement of these physical yellow blocks, of which there are at least 38 in Gaza. And in some places, Israel has moved these blocks hundreds of meters further into Gaza, beyond the line marked on Israel's own maps, taking over even more Palestinian land. But since December, Israel has been constructing these large earth berms, large mounds of earth along the yellow line. So they're actually creating this physical barrier that cuts off Palestinians from the Israeli-controlled zone and from more than half of Gaza. And then finally, in parallel with the construction of this military infrastructure, Israel has also been engaged in systematic demolition and destruction of Palestinian property across Gaza. It was doing this throughout the 2 years, but it has been really concentrating on it since the ceasefire in this area it controls.
Well, another side of this, which I find interesting, is
so they are destroying infrastructure and structures in their controlled areas. I mean, there are pictures coming out of Rafah, which is this area all through here, that like demolition, like it's flattened, like they have destroyed all buildings and everything. I mean, it is really wild what Israel is conducting in this area, and again continuing to build on the land. It is as if they are really literally trying to reshape and pressure the Palestinians into a more restrictive area, completely again going against the original ceasefire, which again they haven't really ceased fire at all, anyways. But then also not really going along with even the operations in which they were supposed to be backing up at this point. They're actually going further and deeper in. But you've got this plan that Trump has introduced and put out there, in acting as if this, all this area is just going to be, reshaped and reworked for the Palestinian people and for all, his all the people who want, investors and stuff, who want to create this utopia-like piece of land for tourism and everything else. What making the rich, ungodly known amount of money or whatever, investing and making him rich as well. I mean, it doesn't seem like the real question is how are you going to get Israel fully on board with this, when this is not at all the intent for Israel, and they do not agree with a lot of this plan, and they have made that known. And they're continuing to worsen, try to hold back the conditions as much as possible, even though recently the Rafah crossing finally opened up to allow Palestinians to go into Egypt and other areas to get the medical attention that is direly needed. But Israel is still even restricting that, and allowing only a little by little, like just a seepage of people out. I think it's roughly around 23,000, I think is the number, of people, Palestinians who are in dire need of medical attention, because the supplies for those that could, help with any of those conditions are not being allowed into the Strip still. The hospitals do not have the capability of handling these things. So they need to go out. But then there's but Israel's controlling that and restricting who can go out. Even though they make the argument that they want all these Palestinians out, but then they create this border and prevent them from even exiting, worsening the issues around the health and well-being of them and their living ability, access to food and clean water and hygiene. They are continuing to restrict as much as they possibly can, even under all the pressure that we supposedly are giving them and other nations are supposedly giving them. They continue to restrict and control as much as they possibly can and manipulate and defy rules and regulations, everything, to make these conditions of the Palestinians continue as long as possible, so that more and more people will just, unfortunately, might not live or die, or create the condition to where they're so bad that they will, that there will be more intent for them to leave. Because there's a lot of Gazans that don't want to leave. But if Israel can continue to make the conditions so bad that if it wasn't bad enough at this point for people to want to leave, and they're still wanting to stay, that speaks to the desire and like strength of these people to stay on the land that they declare and feel and is theirs. Land that they love. They're willing to go through all that they have went through just to stay there. It is intense. But Israel continues to try to make these conditions.
Gaza. It was doing this throughout the 2 years, but it has been really concentrating on it since the ceasefire in this area.
And I think most people don't expect Hamas to disarm. So I'm just wondering, was this deal that was put together, this ceasefire deal, designed to fail so that, in fact, what you just described quite articulately in detail could proceed without any real reverence to the continuation of the Trump deal on Gaza?
I can't think of any ceasefire agreement that Israel has signed in any country that it's been at war with where it has gone past phase one. And so, in the beginning, we kept hearing how if Hamas returns the Israeli captives and returns the remains of those who were killed, then the war would stop. They have returned every Israeli captive and all the remains through some Herculean effort to find them, despite the fact that there's thousands of Palestinian bodies buried under the rubble that the world doesn't seem to care about. And yet the attacks continue. When we talk about disarming Hamas, Hamas has agreed to hand over its weapons to a Palestinian body, to a Palestinian state. And when we talk about disarmament, let's remember, what weapons are we talking about here? Hamas is fighting with Kalashnikov rifles, assault rifles, and they're repurposing unexploded munitions from the Israeli military in order to make some form of explosives to attack. Disarmament is kind of a fig leaf, and senior Hamas officials have told my colleague Jeremy Scahill when he interviewed them that we have weapons of willpower. This is just the will to resist, and that's what Israel wants to vanquish: Palestinian resistance as a cause, and to vanquish the Palestinian cause. So it's not really something that's realistic. And when they say destroy Hamas, Hamas is much more than just its military wing, the Qassam brigades. It's got a social network. It has a large bureaucracy. You can't destroy part of Palestinian society. So, I think this is all intended. And then we know now what they're planning. And what they're planning is the privatization of reconstruction and and these new housing communities that are basically the reincarnation of refugee camps to contain and control a new generation of dispossessed Palestinians. And I can talk to you about what these leaked documents show, because they're quite shocking and quite Orwellian. In mid-January, January 14th, the Civil Military Coordination Center, or the CMCC.
And that was something that I was very concerned with when looking at those pictures stating, these residential areas. That was one thing I thought of, what do you really mean by residential areas? Are we talking about full on housing and stuff like we would picture for ourselves, or are we talking about quite literally containment camps? And what he's speaking on here is that it looks and appears more like containment concentration camps, not like housing that one could be proud of or something.
Held a presentation by the Lieutenant Army General, U.S. Lieutenant Army General, who heads up the CMCC, to international diplomats and figures who were there. And it was about this planned community. So the CMCC was established by U.S. Central Command, by CENTCOM, 1 week after the so-called ceasefire went into effect in October. It's housed in this large warehouse-style building in southern Israel, and it involves dozens of countries and organizations and NGOs. And it's supposed to monitor the implementation of the ceasefire. So when they held this presentation for what they called Gaza First Planned Community, that is being built in Rafah, that would house up to 25,000 Palestinians. And we basically obtained leaked documents about this presentation, and they outline an extensive set of policies regarding everything about Palestinian life in this community, regarding municipality, the economy, health, education, law and order. So we can go through some of this. So firstly, it provides a set of criteria deciding which Palestinians should, quote, be invited to live there. And it includes undergoing security vetting to prevent what they call Hamas elements. It doesn't specify how they will define a Hamas element or who will do the security vetting. But historically, all security checks of Palestinians entering or exiting Gaza, for example, are done by the Israeli military. Another of the criteria for which Palestinians should live in the so-called residential zone, they say intact extended families are preferred to enable mutual aid and prevent friction. After 2 years of genocidal war, is there a single intact extended family in Gaza? I mean, it's all couched in this language of erasure of reality. Israel has completely wiped out 2,700 families in Gaza. There are over 6,000 Palestinians who are the sole survivors of their entire bloodlines. So, this is the kind of language of this presentation.
That is absolutely insane. And that's something that we kept getting reports of, how whenever Israel would, do an attack or whatever, it was like an attack on a specific building, residential building, and an entire family would be taken out, or the majority of a family would be like they were targeting family names. And this is something that they were, we were hearing reports of consistently, and I kept thinking like that is, why does it appear like they're attacking families? And then now we have this, plan here that is like, oh, to qualify, we want, as many families, collective of families or whatever, so that we can distribute aid and stuff in a way that is more like, we'll distribute this by family, but you have to you're only going to get one type of aid, and your whole family is going to have to that's what I'm thinking. Your whole family is just going to have to accept this aid, and you distribute it amongst your family. But what about, like he says, you have over 6,000 who were sole survivors of their families. So what are we talking about? Are they not going to be accepted? Are they going to be expected to, or put into another area, of criteria going to be set up for them, where aid is distributed, in a different way there? I mean, it is so weird. the criteria and stuff that he lays out here that is in these documents.
This cold bureaucratic language that erases the reality of the genocide. But then the way this will actually work, to enter the zone, Palestinians will have to pass through a security checkpoint, and everyone entering will be registered with biometric documentation to enable them not just to enter, but to move around and to access services. And when we talk about services,
Technology,
these are basics,
security,
accessing food and housing. And that registry will be based on Palestinian ID numbers, which are issued by authorities in coordination with the Israeli military. So the Israeli military already has an incredible amount of surveillance and monitoring of Palestinians in Gaza and of the West Bank, but this gives them another level of monitoring through biometrics.
Just to interrupt for a minute, this sounds, if you're going to get the friendly, stable Palestinian, it still sounds like the very top of Palestinian society that they're trying to bring into this, they're going to live in a prison.
Yes, it's effectively a lab for government surveillance. It also brings, for example, economic transactions further under Israeli surveillance. It replaces Gaza's largely cash-based economy with something called electronic shekel wallets. It also,
this sounds like the technocracy type of thing, where we had the video about when I talked about technocracy and the future that is potentially being implemented for even the United States at some point, and it being revolved around energy. Well, this series talking about is shekel points. It's creating this whole different monetary like thing that they will be given or earn or whatever the case, in order for them to engage in this technocratic economy that is going to be established for this security state.
Troublingly, perhaps, it refers to this residential zone as the Emirati compound. It's unclear why that name was chosen. There's an Emirati field hospital nearby. Reporting by The Guardian after Dropside reported on this shows that the UAE will be funding this project. But under the education section of this presentation, it says that they should create a schooling curriculum.
The fact that they're calling it a compound
that, quote, will not be Hamas-based, but will follow culture of peace principles modeled after the UAE. Now that phrase, a culture of peace, is mentioned in the normalization agreement between the UAE and Israel that was signed in 2020 as part of the Abraham Accords. And since then, the UAE has normalized relations with Israel more than any other Arab country. They have robust trade, tourism, defense, and security cooperation. And so this seems aimed at promoting an Emirati-inspired re-education program to promote the idea of normalization with Israel. This is like the vision that they have of what's to come. These housing zones where Israel and foreign forces have complete economic, social, and security control over this new generation of dispossessed Palestinians who are corralled into these spaces. And then the other half of Gaza, west of the Yellow Line, will be left as a wasteland that is under constant assault and bombardment by the Israeli military, where construction is not allowed, with restricted food aid and life essentials, and people are going to be left to try and barely survive under conditions of genocide. And this is the future that the world is trying to write for Gaza.
It raises the interesting question of what the neighborhood is seeing when they look at all the stuff you just talked about. They're seeing the embedding of facilities and infrastructure, Israeli security forces inside Gaza. They're watching this happen. Egypt, Jordan, the Saudis, UAE, Qatar, everyone in the neighborhood. What is the temperature there? Are they just acquiescing to this vision of Jared Kushner?
So what he just laid out there was the idea going on with what is conditionally happening right now is that there will be acceptable places in what Israel has established as their zone at the moment, at least in the near future, or in the who knows for how long, they might start to set up these encampments, and then you will, if those Palestinians who will be accepting of following these rules and this system of security and surveillance will be allowed to live in those areas and get the conditions and stuff that Israel controls, full surveillance state, and those who don't agree to it will be left in this far west corridor where they will have minimal resources and will have to, fight to survive for themselves. That is wild. That is absolutely it's creating the condition to where you either have to accept full security, surveillance, and control over one's life and social acceptance, re-education, or of like compliance under Israel, or you are pressed and put or left to basically survive in a wasteland area with minimal resource acquired as like punishment that you won't accept the powers that be run and rule your life. Like that is wild. That is wild. We're talking about like an apartheid type thing, which is what they've already technically had, but even on steroids.
The Board of Peace and going to let, as you said, the facts of the ground drive what they eventually accept?
To varying degrees, yes. Israel has not formally, legally annexed the West Bank, but it has on the ground. It's annexing land every day. It is taking over land. It is dispossessing villages. Between Ramallah and Jericho in the occupied West Bank, there's not a single Bedouin Palestinian community left. They have all been driven out by attacks by soldiers and armed settlers. They're taking land and dispossessing Palestinians every day. And this has been going on for decades, but has been ramped up in parallel with the assault on Gaza. Egypt has been applauded for not opening its borders to allow a mass displacement of Palestinians. But the government of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, it's not doing this out of any concern for the Palestinian cause or for Palestinians, even though it speaks in that language. It's afraid of having what for them would be a national security catastrophe, to have a mass of displaced Palestinians on their land who could then launch resistance attacks against Israel, like we saw, in decades past in Jordan and in Lebanon and other countries. And we also at DropSite we obtained a leaked draft of the first resolution by the Board of Peace. And it kind of formalizes the hierarchical structure of this body. And it gives the Board of Peace complete legislative, executive, and judicial control over Gaza. So complete control over Gaza. Under the Board of Peace with all these countries, you have the executive board with people like Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, Tony Blair, open supporters of Israel, not a single Palestinian on it. Under that, you have the Gaza Executive Board, which includes several of these same members, but also includes businessmen. With ties to tech, with ties to real estate. And then all the way at the bottom, as I mentioned before, you have this committee of Palestinian technocrats. You also have this, what's called a high representative, who is going to authorize, direct, and supervise this Palestinian committee. And then supposedly you're going to have some kind of international stabilization force, although there's a lot of trouble getting together of that force. But the text of the resolution says that the stated goal of the Board of Peace is to transform Gaza into a de-radicalized and demilitarized terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. That's the language used in the resolution. And perhaps most troublingly is that it creates eligibility requirements for Palestinians. It bars from participation any individual, it says, quote, have supported or have a demonstrated history of collaboration, infiltration, or influence with or by Hamas or other terror groups. Very vague terms. It doesn't make clear how it's going to make these determinations. But basically, it's creating these eligibility requirements for Palestinians to participate in governance, in reconstruction, in economic development, and humanitarian assistance. And essentially what that is conditioning Palestinians' ability to survive in Gaza on compliance with this plan. And this is all happening with, pretty much the tacit approval of the international community. It also states, the resolution says, no one will be forced to leave Gaza. Those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. But it also makes clear that access to resources, to aid, to political participation is conditional on compliance with what's called the comprehensive plan. And so, again, this is essentially a colonial mandate with a complete set of rules of governance that has complete control, that's overseen by a foreign body.
Well, we've heard...
And that speaks to this idea. It reminds me of what's going on right now, even within the United States, where Trump is, constantly attacking his opposition and threatening to restrict or not, give aid to any state or local ordinance or whatever that opposes him. This kind of thing. It's the same kind of thought here when it comes to Gaza and Palestinians, that if you have been in any way or is designated in any way that you have been in opposition to Israel or your neighbors to any extent, and have been in some sort of support or compliance with Hamas, which now we've known and heard that Israel has. I mean, they have always stated that every fucking Palestinian in Gaza is to blame for Hamas, that they are all in support, and so they are all to blame for the actions of Hamas. So under this type of vague compliancy rules, one would argue, as Israel more than likely will, that no Palestinian would actually comply to that ordinance, because they would say that they all were in support of Hamas. I mean, that's been their whole argument this whole time, that it was okay if innocent, quote unquote, innocent Palestinians, that because no Palestinian is innocent. That's their, they are not even considered. Many of the people in Israel government don't even consider Palestinians humans. They are animals to them. They are the scum of the earth that they don't even designate as human. And they all should die and perish. That is literally the opinion in rhetoric of many members in Netanyahu's cabinet and in the Israeli government. So these people they will just make the argument that no Palestinian adds up to that. So that means that no Palestinian would comply, which means no Palestinian would be able to have access to any of these, in any ability to manage or assist or help in the growth or re-infrastructure or construction of Gaza in any kind, or even potentially access to resources. It is, and wow, you might be, oh no, that's not going to happen. That's not what they mean. That's not. If Israel gets their way, which they usually do, that's exactly what it's going to mean. And with Trump at the head of the Board of Peace, and we already seen the way he treats Americans here, do you think he was going to give a fuck about how Israel treats Palestinians there? He will go right along with it. This is set up to be the worst possible situation for the Palestinians living in Gaza right now. And even the Palestinians living in the West Bank, where how he's continued to talk about how they're continuing to take and annex land, pushing more and more Palestinians off of land, to the point that they're eventually just going to push them, and they're going to have to be forced into either something similar set up in the West Bank, or push those people in the West Bank to Gaza in this setup. Mark my words. These people, the Zionist movement and members of our own government that help facilitate and assist in the movement, in the actions that they take, the support that is given. These people, they're evil. They are evil. They are the remnants of an ideology that goes all the way back to the Nazis. And it is being recreated now.
Many Israeli officials say they want to see Palestinians leave over the Rafah crossing, border crossing, and they want fewer to come back than go. How wrapped up, we've been talking about the Palestinians that they're going to build housing for and stay, but how continuous is the depopulation and eradication strategy that many people believe Israel is engaged in with the much broader Palestinian population?
I mean, I think, it's been clear if you look at Israeli policy in Palestine for decades, it is one of dispossessing the indigenous population of Palestinians, driving them out with slow bureaucratic processes, with genocidal violence now, with apartheid policies. And so this is the ultimate goal. Whether they can achieve it, I mean, there's 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And what we saw during the genocidal war is that, they want them to leave, but they're not allowing them to leave. The borders were closed to them. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, have left. I know there's something like 100,000 in Egypt already from Gaza. But they have also restricted them from leaving and have slaughtered them and made the conditions of life impossible. So we have to see if Rafah opens, how many will be allowed out. And I think there's a definite mix. They've completely destroyed Gaza. So there's many Palestinians that they need to leave. The conditions of life are not there. There's a whole generation. There's no schooling. There's hardly any healthcare. There's no jobs. There's nothing there. So I think many want to leave. But we also saw this incredible testament to Palestinians' attachment to their land. For example, in the January ceasefire and again in the October ceasefire, once the bombs stopped falling, at least in the Scorched Earth campaign, upwards of 500,000 Palestinians moved back to the north of Gaza. They were driven south, and they moved back north once they were able to, both times, in January and in October. So we see this determination by many Palestinians in Gaza to remain on their land. They want to rebuild on the rubble of their homes and to stay there. So we'll have to see what's happening and what's next in this next chapter.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights.
And that is the wild part about this, is that and that's I think the whole point. Israel acts like they want them to all leave. But in reality, Israel wouldn't really want them to all leave, because then that would just push a group of people that they consider a threat to them into an area that they would no longer be able to control, because these people would be in Egypt or they'd be in Jordan, and they would no longer be able to control them. So while their rhetoric is that they want them to leave, they want them to leave in the way that they're just no longer there. And they want a minimal amount to actually physically leave. That way there's a less of a threat outside of this area that they can control them in. Because they wouldn't fear just, a couple 100,000 of them maybe in Egypt or Jordan or whatever. Or spread across, multiple countries or whatever. But they would fear, the whole group, because then they would just establish something like, the fear that they would just establish something where they would just continue, they would go right back to, attacking Israel, because of, just the retaliation in the anger and frustration that their lives and things that have been taken from them, their land was taken from them, they were excommunicated from where they considered their homeland, and where their way of existence, and that would embolden and make anyone really fight back on that as a goal, which is, been the resistance this whole time when it comes to Hamas and other groups, is that their whole goal was to resist this control that Israel has forced on these people for decades now. And now they are just deeming further and stronger control. So Israel doesn't really want them to literally physically go anywhere. They just want them to no longer be there. So they can continue to create the conditions where little by little, through bureaucracy and controlling of resources, restricting of resources, that little by little, the population will eventually decrease naturally. That's what they've really been trying to do all along. So that they're less of a threat. And then they can continue to take over the land. That's what Israel's whole point has been this whole time. That way they can go around the argument of, no, it's not really a genocide because we didn't kill everybody. They just died or they just left. It's a like twisted, sadistic plan and idea that Israel has been carrying out for decades now. And it's only been accelerated since October 7th. Like in a way that they wanted to accelerate it before. Nothing about this plan, nothing about this setup is for genuinely for trying to create the conditions for a prosperous Palestinian existence. It's just not. They're either going to have to comply and be under full surveillance state control by Israel or this governing body that's, ultimately going to probably be Israel. Or they're going to be left to conditions that is eventually going to eradicate them. So that then Israel can completely take over the area. More than likely, by that time, we will just allow them to. The business people who have in investment will go to, those who have invested in the area. That will just be turned into an Israel controlled or Israel invested piece of land that will then be a part of Israel. So they will reap the benefits of whatever industry is is in plans to be created there by all these rich and wealthy people in industries. I mean, it's ultimately going to be perfect for Israel and exactly what they want. The elimination of Palestinians by means that they will be able to argue they didn't have, they didn't force. They will say that it was their choice and they chose in a way that did not benefit them. We were going to give them the ability to survive, albeit under full control. It is insane. It is insane and speaks to the evil of these people. The evil of the Zionist movement and the government that's in control in Israel. The Zionist sympathizers or even full-on Zionist ideology that exists within the U.S. government. And with wealthy Israel backers in the corporate sphere, or just, like the the Adelsons and multiple others. It is. I don't even know. I don't even know how it can be stopped, because there seems to be no will from other countries to, like, or ability even by other countries or anybody that does not actually agree with what's happening to do anything about it. And unless we are able to get some sort of leadership that would actually, again, have the balls to go against it and attempt to right these wrongs, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how how this can actually be rectified. I genuinely don't. And it's upsetting and sad and, like, angers me, and I'm certainly sure it angers many others around the United States and other nations, that this modern day Nazi like regime is getting away with these actions. And it be blatantly obvious, and there's nothing we can do about it. Let me know what you think, though. Something's got to give. Like, something's got to give. Let me know what you think. Thank you very much for joining me here. We will continue to watch this. We'll continue to talk about it. As more information is revealed or situations degrade, or what, there's got to be there needs to be an international outcry. Like, on the grandest, most the scale ever in history, against what's happening. Until next time, later, peace, clear talk. I'm out.